Kinahan Cartel, the very name sends a chill through anyone familiar with Europe's underworld. A tightly run crime family once based on Spain's sun-drenched Costa del Sol. Their resume includes industrial-scale drug smuggling, global money laundering, and a trail of bodies. Crime bosses rarely fall on their own sword. They usually go down because they get sloppy if someone talks to the police, or sheer misfortune brings them down. Today's video centres on the last person you'd expect to play a part in almost dismantling that empire, a former goalkeeper who once saved a penalty from a Manchester United legend. Eddie van Boxtel was a promising keeper from Ballymun who spent a season at Leeds United.
Among those expected to move to England in the near future is goalkeeper Eddie van Boxtel.
Went across channel to Arsenal and Chelsea and got to 5 other clubs, and I've done well in Dublin Kennedy Cups and All-Ireland finals and things like that, and I played well.
He wasn't destined to make headlines for his football. In 2008, he was arrested in connection with a €10.5 million cannabis haul, and the dominoes that tumbled after his arrest would expose some of the Kinahan Cartel's secrets. What follows is the role of the goalkeeper who unintentionally got some of the high-ranking drug dealers in the cartel arrested. Ballymun in the late 1980s was a tough North Dublin suburb known for its tower blocks and close community. Amid the concrete estates, a lanky teenager named Eddie van Boxtel spends hours training to become a professional footballer. The Dutch-born youngster had moved to Ireland as a child and found a bit of purpose between the posts. Early on, he caught the eye of scouts, and by 17, he signed for Leeds United. For a regular kid from Ballymun, Elland Road was a big step in those days. At Leeds United, he trained alongside professional footballers and even played against Manchester United in a pre-season friendly tournament. There's a memorable moment that supporters still talk about to this day. During the game at Dundalk's Oriel Park, Eric Cantona stepped up to take a penalty. The youngster guessed correctly and saved the shot, sending the crowd mental. The fairy tale save didn't lead to a fairy tale career though. Eddie had lots of clashes with his manager at Leeds that led to him falling out of favour with the team, and after just one season, he was sent back home. Back in Ireland, he joined Dundalk United and played a part in their triumph in the league that season, the club's first in a decade. For a while, he was a cult hero, a safe pair of hands who went on to play for Galway United, Bray Wanderers, Monaghan United and Home Farm. Fans still reminisce about his agility and the odd penalty save, but the bright lights of English football remained a distant dream. He later admitted to his friends that he never felt that he reached his potential. By his late 30s, the little money he made started to dry up. Younger keepers began to take his place and he drifted out of the professional game. He spent a season working with his brother and playing for an amateur side, but the glory days were gone. During that period, his life takes a detour he could never have predicted, entangled with shadows. Life after football can be harsh for any athlete. The camaraderie of the dressing room disappears, the wage shrinks, and that sense of purpose evaporates. Eddie struggled badly. According to people who knew him, he developed a taste for gambling and racked up debts. The debts grew, and the reliability he once showed on the pitch was absent from his personal finances. He had connections in Dublin that extended beyond sport. People he met at local pubs or on nights out who seemed to have endless cash and no obvious job. These were lieutenants and runners for the Kinahan Cartel, a gang that controlled much of Ireland's cocaine and cannabis trade. Spain's Costa del Sol was their hub at the time. From there, they orchestrated shipments of drugs hidden in consignments of furniture, meat and even children's toys. They knew which shipping routes were safe and which customs officers could be bought. Eddie's name doesn't immediately make you think of a hardened criminal, and perhaps that's why he proved useful. A washed-up footballer can easily travel without drawing suspicion. He began by doing small favours for gang members, delivering packages, introducing people, vouching for certain associates. Desperate to clear gambling debts and maintain his lifestyle, he agreed to hide drugs for the Kinahan gang. His role expanded rapidly from there. He transported consignments across Ireland, drove vans loaded with cannabis resin from safe houses to rural drop-offs, and even travelled abroad on dodgy passports arranged by the cartel. He created fake companies to provide cover, making shipments look like legitimate imports of Spanish food or building materials. Eddie was paid handsomely and given the assurance that he was working for a crime family with friends in high places. For someone who had lost his sense of purpose, the adrenaline rush and easy money were intoxicating. However, the deeper he went, the more dangerous the game became. Police investigators were already watching the cartel. Surveillance teams followed vans leaving ports, tapped phones and monitored suspicious meetings. Eddie's name surfaced repeatedly. He was seen chatting with known gang members, attending meetings in pubs and industrial estates, and all this while driving vehicles linked to the network. On the 6th of February 2008, detectives made their move. After weeks of intelligence, officers from the National Drugs Unit set up an operation near Castlewarden South, a stretch of dual carriageway outside Kildare. They believed a shipment of cannabis was on its way to a safe house. At about 7 p.m, a van pulled into a lay-by. The Irish police blocked the road and arrested 4 men on the spot. Inside the van, they found pallets wrapped in black plastic. When they cut open the package, the unmistakable smell of cannabis filled the air. The shipment weighed over a ton and had a street value of €10.5 million. It was one of the biggest cannabis seizures in Irish history. Among the men on the roadside in handcuffs was Eddie van Boxtel, then 41. He was charged with possession of cannabis resin worth €3.5 million for sale or supply. The 3 other men were taken into custody. Eddie kept his head down as photographers tried to get his picture. The goalkeeper, who once basked in applause, was now facing reporters' lenses for all the wrong reasons. This was a big win for the investigators and all the police officers who worked this case. They suspected the consignment had come through Spain disguised as legitimate goods, and that the gang intended to distribute it across Ireland. Eddie's job was to oversee the handover to middlemen who would break down the shipment. Officers believed he was trusted as a safe pair of hands who would try his best to ensure nothing went missing. After his arrest, he was charged and then released on bail. He was scheduled to appear in Naas District Court in July 2008. He never showed. The once reliable shot stopper had just committed a howler that would cost him dearly. A bench warrant was issued and Eddie vanished. Overnight, he went from being a footnote in a drug case to one of Ireland's most wanted fugitives. His disappearance raised eyebrows even among hardened criminals. Word was that threats from within the gang and paranoia spooked him. Meanwhile, the Irish National Police had other problems to worry about because the Castlewarden seizure was merely the tip of an iceberg. Eddie wasn't aware of the problems his arrest had stirred within law enforcement. Just 2 days before his cannabis shipment was intercepted, a Kinahan enforcer named Paddy Doyle was ambushed and killed on a roadside in Estepona, Spain. It was a significant escalation in a simmering feud. The Gardaí, working with Spanish police, believed the murder was linked to internal disputes and rival gangs muscling in on the lucrative Costa del Sol drug routes. As investigators looked through the evidence, they stumbled upon another clue. Customs officers had intercepted a crate of Spanish produce at an Irish port containing 1.5 tons of marijuana. Hidden among boxes of peppers and oranges were vacuum-packed blocks of cannabis. The paperwork on the shipment led back to a web of companies registered in Malaga and London, all front businesses for the Kinahan Cartel. The scale of the operation spooked authorities. Europol convened a meeting in The Hague in July 2008, bringing together police from Ireland, Spain, the UK, Belgium and the Netherlands. They pooled intelligence and agreed to an unprecedented joint operation. Meanwhile, surveillance teams in the UK tracked another suspicious parcel bound for London that contained semi-automatic firearms. In March 2009, British police raided a warehouse in London and seized a stash of guns. A man with links to Christy Kinahan was arrested. That raid confirmed suspicions that the cartel was not only smuggling drugs but also guns into the UK and Ireland. Investigators traced the firearms back to suppliers on the Costa del Sol and noted that similar consignments had been shipped via Irish ports. Every seizure emboldened police forces to push further. On the Kinahan side, paranoia set in. The normally secretive organisation had been compromised. Christy Kinahan is known to run his enterprise like a multinational corporation. His sons Daniel and Christy Jr. handled security and finances respectively. They invested drug profits into property, cement companies, sugar imports and meat processing plants. These legitimate-looking businesses served as smuggling covers and money laundering fronts. Containers of sugar or meat would travel from Spain to Ireland, with a few swapped lids and hidden compartments turning them into drug mules. If one shipment was seized, another 5 would get through. The Castlewarden haul and the intercepted food crate showed that the Gardaí were learning the routes. The panic rippled through the network and some of the gang's foot soldiers began to fear for their freedom. Eddie's disappearance, rather than protecting him, put him in even more danger. Everyone associated with the busted shipment was now a liability. For 6 years, Eddie was a ghost. He travelled under assumed names, moved between Ireland, Holland and Spain, and used his connections to try and stay 2 steps ahead of law enforcement. His friends in Ballymun would occasionally hear rumours that he'd been spotted in Amsterdam. He was working construction in Marbella, was seen at a boxing event or something like that. The truth was hard to pin down. The Gardaí believed he continued working with the cartel, arranging deliveries and using his local knowledge to maintain supply lines. Each time investigators got close, he slipped away. He was due back in court in July 2008 and was still on the run until 2014. In late February 2014, the National Drugs Unit received a tip. Eddie was back in Dublin for a brief visit. Surveillance teams tracked a man matching his description to an apartment complex. They watched as he came and went, seemingly cautious but unaware that he was being watched. When officers moved in, they found him carrying false documents. He didn't even try to resist arrest. During his court hearing, detectives explained that Eddie had been wanted since he skipped bail in 2008. This was so that the judge could rule out bail for him. He spent months in custody awaiting trial. In January 2015, he pleaded guilty for possession of cannabis for sale or supply. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison with 2.5 years suspended. He was sent to Mountjoy prison to serve his sentence, with the occasional prisoner recognising him from his football days. It was also rumoured that he played in goal for the prison football team while he was there. While Eddie was on the run, there was a bigger operation running. An Europol investigation reached its climax on May 25, 2010. At dawn, over 700 police officers fanned out across Spain, Ireland, the UK, Belgium and the Netherlands. The main target was Costa del Sol. Armed units stormed villas, warehouses and luxury apartments. At the same time in Dublin, officers kicked in doors in Ballyfermot, Crumlin and Clondalkin. Operation Shovel was the codename for this operation. By nightfall, 34 people were in custody, including Christy Kinahan and his sons Daniel and Christy Jr. Also arrested were John Cunningham, a convicted kidnapper, and Michael McAvoy, a man linked to the legendary Brinks-Mat gold heist. Computers, ledgers and millions in cash were seized. Cars worth hundreds of thousands of pounds were towed away. Police celebrated a rare chance to parade major gangsters in handcuffs. The operation exposed the scale of the Kinahan empire. Investigators pored over company records and discovered an intricate web of businesses in property development, meat trading and sugar imports. One firm in Mercia shipped meat to the UK and Ireland. Hidden inside its containers were packets of cocaine and firearms. Payments were routed through companies in Malaga. Security was orchestrated by Daniel Kinahan, while Christy Jr. shuffled money through offshore accounts. A Spanish police source summed up their strategy: move containers around the world until you find the safest routes, then use them to smuggle anything you want. After the raids, prosecutors in Malaga warned that the case was far from over. They eventually dropped the most serious drugs and arms charges because key evidence was deemed inadmissible. Nevertheless, the financial investigations continued. One officer admitted that although the operation hadn't dismantled the cartel entirely, it stripped them of millions and made it almost impossible for them to find reliable partners. For Christy Kinahan, the biggest blow wasn't his brief detention, it was the fact that he and his sons had been publicly named and shamed. Customers began to doubt whether he could still guarantee safe supply lines. His rivals saw an opportunity. The long-running feud between the Kinahans and the Hutch clan escalated into shootings and ambushes. The gang that had once prided itself on operating in the shadows now found itself under relentless surveillance. Eddie served his sentence without incident. He kept to himself in prison and avoided any trouble. It's unclear whether he provided information to the Gardaí. Some sources suggest he may have helped police with details about safe houses and couriers in exchange for a reduced sentence. Others believe he was simply caught up in circumstances beyond his control and served his time without cooperating. Whatever the truth, Eddie's arrest clearly triggered a series of events. The Gardaí and European police used the Castlewarden seizure to build their case against the Kinahan organisation. The evidence that followed, weapons found in London, drugs hidden in Spanish food shipments, gave investigators the confidence to push harder. Each successful prosecution weakened the cartel's reputation. By the time Eddie was released, the Kinahan name had lost its power. In 2022, the United States placed sanctions on Christy, Daniel and Christy Jr., calling them significant transnational criminals. Spanish authorities are still pursuing money laundering cases against them. Other criminal groups have taken over parts of their territory. The cartel still exists, but it operates differently now. They use more middlemen and smaller operations to move drugs. New leaders have emerged and people still want to buy drugs. But the reputation that once made the Kinahan name feared has been damaged by internal fighting, public violence, and perhaps surprisingly, a former goalkeeper who got in over his head. When people think about organised crime, they usually imagine criminal masterminds, secure communications and dangerous enforcers. They don't often consider the former sportsmen, office workers or drivers whose small roles can actually bring down entire operations. Eddie van Boxtel's story shows what can happen. A young man with ability and ambition makes poor choices, gets involved with criminals, and driven by money problems and poor judgment, becomes part of a large criminal network. His arrest on a quiet road in County Kildare led to investigations across Europe and major police operations. It showed how ordinary people can unintentionally expose crime bosses when police are prepared to act.
The goalkeeper from Ballymun demonstrates that in criminal organisations, the most unlikely people can sometimes cause the biggest problems, and that those who seem unimportant can sometimes bring down the most powerful.